Months ago I made a video showing a 2-minute and 13-second defret. Flexing aside, I do this to all new aftermarket necks I buy. You might be wondering why. Well, in this 6-part video series, I'm going to show you exactly why. You'll see my process for taking an inexpensive aftermarket neck and transforming it into something truly top shelf. Today we'll address recontouring the headstock and heel and how to apply a simple hand-rubbed finish. First, I soften the harsh lines on the back of the headstock. I go at it pretty aggressively with a flat file, knocking down all the sharp edges and getting it smooth and round, closer to how all vintage Fender necks were shaped. I also use a round file. It's helpful to navigate around the outer edges of the headstock and tighter corners where a flat file can't reach without mangling the rest of the wood surrounding it. You develop a feel for the angle and stroke of the files after a while, and of course, the degree and nature of the contours is up to your personal preference. I'll use the same method at the heel of the neck. Working a flat file in a rolling motion gives a nice softened edge that's a lot friendlier to your fretting hand. Rounding it even more is fine too if you want to take it that far, but I prefer not going too crazy at the heel. After the files, I use 320 grit sandpaper and a foam block to smooth everything out. I also hold the sandpaper between my fingers with no backing block to follow the contours even more carefully. Keep going until all the file marks are gone and the contours are completely softened and blended. After sanding, a Scotch-Brite pad gets you one step closer to a silky smooth feel. With the contouring done, the headstock and the back of the neck need to be finished. But to do that cleanly, I need to remove the nut. This one was particularly stubborn, so I needed to use a hammer and a precision screwdriver to pry the nut out on both ends. The trick is to line up the edge of the screwdriver with the bottom of the nut and carefully hammer it in. As you hammer it further, the nut will lift out of the slot. Repeat the process on the other side, and the nut will be out in no time. With the shaping completed and the nut removed, I can start applying the finish to the headstock and the back of the neck. I prefer a completely non-toxic hand-rubbed finish made with grain alcohol and a mix of blonde and orange de-waxed shellac flakes. The darker tinted shellac flakes finish to a rich, deep color reminiscent of an older instrument. Here I'm using a 2-pound cut, which means 25% shellac flakes in solution. For example, 14 grams of grain alcohol would mean using 3.5 grams of shellac flakes, which you get by multiplying 0.25 by 14. A 1-pound cut is about 12% shellac in solution, and a 3-pound cut is about 37%. 25% is a good starting point, and you can vary from there depending on personal preference. You only need a little bit for doing a neck, so in this case, 14 grams of alcohol will be more than enough. Using a coffee grinder to powder the shellac flakes, I funnel everything into a glass dropper bottle and let it dissolve overnight. Periodically giving it a good shake helps a lot, and once the shellac is fully dissolved, it's ready to use. For an applicator, I take a lint-free cloth, cut a small strip, and fold it up. Paper towels also work fine, but can leave a little fuzz behind that you'll have to knock off between coats. A small wide-mouth mason jar makes a perfect container for the cloth and will keep it from drying out if you want to take a break and put it away for the day. Glass dropper bottles are the best containers for shellac and grain alcohol and make applying them a breeze. And with this compact finishing setup completed, we're ready to start finishing. First I'll do the back of the neck because this will have barely any finish on it at all. Load the cloth with a little shellac and work on 2 or 3 coats, then apply some Renaissance wax and wipe it off. Add a little grain alcohol to the cloth and rub on one more thin coat of shellac. This seals and protects the wood with the barest minimum of material and leaves it feeling super slick, smooth, and fast. It's incredible and is my favorite finish for the back of the neck. For the headstock, work the shellac in with a circular motion on the flat front and back and in a straight line on the edges. I reload the cloth frequently with shellac to keep it wet, and once I've done that several times, I'll start adding a little pure grain alcohol. This reactivates the shellac that is already in the cloth, helps to even out the dried shellac already on the workpiece, and helps to prevent the cloth from sticking. As you build up the coats, and shellac dries extremely fast so you can build coats very quickly, the tint will darken and the sheen will become more and more prominent. Just be careful to only do 1 or 2 passes with each coat. Otherwise the shellac will dry while rubbing it on. It'll stick to itself and pull off the finish, which will leave an ugly fuzzy spot that you'll have to knock down pretty aggressively with a Scotch-Brite pad and do over again. However, using a Scotch-Brite pad or another mild abrasive in between coats to keep things even is common practice. Just remember that with shellac, it's very thin and coats build very slowly, so you only have to do this occasionally. If you're going for a satin finish, you can simply leave it alone after using the Scotch-Brite pad and you'll be good to go. But this time around I'm going for a glossy finish, so I'm going to keep applying coats until I get there. The heel of the neck is done the same way as the headstock, and while my main focus is on the back and sides, I make sure to seal the end as well. This provides protection against moisture, and it's important not to neglect this part of the neck. As you can see, even with nothing but a lint-free cloth, shellac, and grain alcohol, you can achieve impressive results. To me, this is perfect, even though close up you can see fine lines, and the finish isn't wet sanded and buffed to a super high gloss. I love the handmade look and feel, even though I have the ability to wet sand and buff with a foam pad, a drill, and a series of Meguiar's polishing compounds. As great as all this equipment is, and while it definitely has its place, there's a beauty in simplicity. With the shaping, contouring, and finishing of the headstock and back of the neck completed, I'm ready to move on to the next step in the process. Tune in to part 2 to see the fretboard sanded into a unique compound radius and finished with shellac afterwards. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.